hardworking and obedient girl whose father, the chief, had doted on tirelessly. My mom, she was the village advisor. She knew all the goings on in every household and who needed what treatment. I overheard that one of our neighbors needed Bakari, the local medicine man, to give her a cure for her husband's belching in bed. In another home, a poultice for a hurting back. And in yet another, my mom was coaching a man on how to live gently with his wife. It was not easy being the chief's wife, but my mom, she carried it with so much decorum. I wondered if I'd be able to keep so many secrets, as we typically spent all mornings with my girls doing all the chores from one household to another, and all we did was gossip about what we saw. And early afternoon, we would laugh the whole way to the river. It was playtime. Often, the girls used to shower together and inspected one another's bodies. I had something to show: a singular pubic hair. Hiya! The girls crooned. It's about time, one of my cousins said, and they all laughed. The older girls were about to go through the passage, and the younger girls helped them decorate their bodies. I wondered when my day would come. I longed for it. On the morning of the passage, I was up early. I had strung small pieces of river rock for my cousin's headpiece. My cousin, she wore it beautifully. All the girls that were undergoing the passage, they did a beautiful dance to Mapacha, the goddess of fertility. And the boys did one to Shuja, the god of provision, to enable them to protect their families and provide for them. It was breathtaking. The ceremony, it went on so well. The villagers, they settled into dancing, eating, to celebrate the future. Suddenly, and without anticipation, the village was under attack. It was the police. They kicked down pots of food, traditional brew, men, women, and children. They were beaten and put in trucks. Baba, my father, the chief, he was stripped, beaten, and put in a different car. He tried to fight back, but his hands and his eyes were bound. He kept on calling to the villagers, asking them to remain calm, telling them that he would stay strong. I couldn't see my mother. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Our village, my home, everything I knew, it was desecrated. It would be months before we, the villagers, were settled at home again. They had lost so much, yet none had the strength to speak up. Laughter had fallen on the day of the passage, and no one could understand why. How can you mourn a stolen life while still breathing? There were no words to describe what we were going through. We were walking raiderless carcasses without our community, our culture. Baba, the chief, he was released after months of torture. He was asked to abandon his culture and take up the white man's god and religions, which he knew nothing of. Ma, the one who was spending all her hours making reed baskets for the villagers, she was now working in a home. She was helping the police constable's wife with her chores. She was the chief's wife. Her stature was now not recognizable. She was doing little girl's work. And I was taken to the white man's school. And I was told that everything I knew about the passage and our culture, everything was wrong. Being in a school away from home, it was odd. I knew life was lonely and different. So many things were new for me, but every time I raised that issue, there would be howls of laughter. But a few offered to help or teach me. I resigned myself into silently coping. My friends in school, they never told me about their pubic hair. And I finally saw the monthly blood that my aunties told me about, but there was no one to share the good news with. I missed the village. I missed my cousin. I eventually adapted to school. It was the end of year and everyone was going clubbing to celebrate. I was told that it was a form of growing up and a rite of passage for one to be able to go out alone at night, but that I should be very careful. I was also told that there was going to be a lot of dancing, and I knew so many dances from the village, so I was looking forward to it. My roommate, she gave me a whole set of cool clothes. On the evening of our last paper, my classmates and I, we arrived at the dark alley leading to the club at about 8 p.m. The lights were very blinding. I was anxious about it. It didn't feel right. But I'm a liberal woman now. I patted down my hair, gave my armpit a sniff, calmed down as I opened the door and went in.
Grace and I are best friends. We were born on the same day. We grew up to the same experiences, and I had always hoped we'd go through most of life together. Meet and marry best friends. We liked the same things. But that didn't get to happen. I missed Grace. The talking and laughing, helping one another with chores. I at least got to see her once a month. But that just wasn't enough. I hated that we were separated. Oh, and lately, she had taken a liking to long, colorful braids. She had truly become a city girl. Initially, I had disliked boarding school. But as the days passed and I joined college, I took to partying and clubbing on my weeks away from home, which left me feeling better. The music was different and invigorating. The lights were intoxicating, and occasionally I took alcohol. I met Doc on the dance floor. He was handsome and tall, with a broken tooth soiling his perfect smile, but also calling for attention. We danced and danced. I had never met anyone like him before. He was not from my tribe, but nowadays, no one was a taboo. Traditions were dying off. It was a whirlwind. He taught me all sorts of things. How to shave my legs, how to make sugar drinks so as to overcome heavy nights out. Oh, he took me to get my nails painted. I just love everything about him. Then, I fell pregnant. I was very confused. I didn't know what to do. I went to the student nurse assigned to women at the college, and all she told me was, "Where will a young mother go with a child on her hip? It will ruin your career." She basically told me I should have an abortion so as to not ruin my life. I confided in one of my lecturers, and he smiled at me suggestively. Promised to front me the money for an abortion if I would sleep with him. I was disgusted and thought about it for a minute before throwing up at the thought of another man touching me. In my lonely desperation, I went to see Grace. I broke down as soon as we met. I didn't give her a minute to get a word in about herself and her new boyfriend. Once I told her my predicament, we called everyone we could think of. She called her boyfriend, who suggested a backdoor abortion clinic, but we were too scared. Together we couldn't think of anyone else to help us think through this, apart from the ladies who talked to us at some high school. But none of them was easy to find or reach anymore. We cried together. And all I remember was how stuck, despondent, scared, and alone I felt. I screamed in the middle of the night. I made up my mind to go home and tell my parents. They would know what to do. My father was livid. He was now a church elder, having worked so hard for the recognition. And he called my child a bastard who would marry a woman with a bastard child. I was in disbelief. The father I knew, the one who raised me, would never have done this. Children were a blessing. That's what we were always taught. My mother asked me to stay and keep the baby, but my father wouldn't bear of it. And Mama gave it to him, alone and angry. I left and went back to campus. Doc finally visited me after weeks of my tears flowing. He said he was not ready to have a child and that I should get rid of it. He also suggested that he would take me to a dark clinic run by a clinician he knew who would help me. He said it was the best for our future. For days, the words from my father tore at my heart. I hated my life. I agreed with Doc, and he helped me get rid of it. After that, our relationship, our future, didn't last much longer. I tried to go back to school and my life. A few months later, I was called to an urgent family meeting convened by my father. He made it clear that there would be consequences for anyone who did not attend the meeting. At the meeting, he told us, his family, that he had decided to go back to his true African self. That too much religion was not working for him anymore. My mother's husband had called to introduce us to his new wife-to-be. He was going to be polygamous. The girl he was marrying was my age mate, and at a glance, all I could see was that she was heavily with child. I was heartbroken that he would support his new wife and had tossed me out without a second thought. Reeling from the shock of the news, I boarded a bus back to the city, vowing never to come back. As I approached my stop, I saw a familiar face. Doc. My heart skipped a bit. I had missed him. Just then, I noticed that by his side was a beautiful girl with long braids. They were holding hands. I signaled for the tout to let me out. I would confront the man whose bastard I carried. As soon as I alighted, I raced their way. My blood was boiling, my hands were sweating. I felt myself tremble. And without notice, I pulled the girl's braids and came face to face with a very pregnant Grace. Oh my goodness!
finally found the woman who stole my heart, she said. My life is finally making sense. And something about that statement was simply endearing. She wasn't the perfect fit for my family, but I wanted to protect her. Her previous marriage had ended in a rather disrespectful manner, and that had left her fiercely protective of her space. Before I met her, Mkai was in dire straits. She was in debt and needed to make sure that her job was made permanent. And so she stayed after work to learn what she thought she didn't know about the job when everyone had left. She was a city girl aiming for the top. She felt that she had lost so much by being a housewife, but she had done that to keep her home. On men, I badly wanted to change her thoughts. So when she complained to me about how much she hated walking home in the evening after work, I decided to go and walk with her. To be honest, I just couldn't understand why she couldn't ignore the cat calling. But she told me it was a hard experience for her every time, grueling even. It started slowly with the watchman always cat calling her. Then words both admiring and sexualizing her. Madam, hey, habari yako? Hey, uko smart, eh? Kuna vile hizo longi zimekushika. Asking her if he could keep her company in her office on her late nights. Asking her if she would just let him try a corporate woman. Madam, najua huko, mimi niko hapa. Si, unajua kuna baridi, wacha nikuje hapo nikulinde. Unajua nakwanga na fimbo, na unajua hii fimbo yangu najua kuchapa. It annoyed me even further when she told me about how she had to walk faster and faster until she was out of sight and finally she could breathe. She wished they'd stop that. A few of them had approached her, and even though she told them not to, they didn't listen. She complained about the building security to her supervisors to ask them to stop. But even her supervisor shrugged it off as harmless fun. Achana nao watu. Unajua ni watchman. Kazi yao ni kuchukua ID na kuandika jina lako kwa kitabu. Hawana ubaya. Harmless? Fun? What? And with her eyes drenched in tears, she seemed so visibly afraid. How much fun is fear? She asked. Mkai hated that she often had to think about what she wore and even where she worked. Constantly having to navigate verbal assault with humility, even when it potentially got aggressive. How to keep calm with her knees buckling, blood boiling and curdling at the same time. Anxiety attacks, panic, sweaty palms. Months passed, and finally, she was made permanent. She could afford to finally start buying furniture for her house, as her ex-husband's family had thrown her out in the middle of the night for being childless. Their loss. I planned to show her how deeply valued she was. I introduced her early to my parents as a woman that I loved. She explained to me that she was not able to bear any children. And I was more than happy to look at other options outside of natural childbirth. She was excited at the prospects, and I was excited at the prospect of her and our life together. On the morning that the agency brought to us our twin boys, Nkai fainted. Quickly rushed her to the hospital. Coincidentally, her ex-husband's sister-in-law was the nurse in charge. She seemed harmless. I despised her the minute she was identified to me. We waited with bated breath to hear details of what the issue was from the doctor. Nkai was pregnant with our first child.
Many things depending on who I'm with. Grandmother, mother, sister, aunt, friend. I hear I'd proven to be quite malleable from a very young age. You see, my mother had groomed me to be the chief's wife. And honestly, I'd taken to it with ease. I'd learned how to make poultices and potions, how to survive in battle, everything about sex and childbirth. But nothing had prepared me for the raid by the police. The months of limbo away from my husband were torture. Not to mention being reduced to doing household work in someone else's house. That was the work of young girls whose breasts were just budding. My husband had half lost his mind after the raid and was now far away, preoccupied with learning the new religion and spreading it across the country. Me, I would never take up the new religion. I loved my culture too much, plus it's all I knew. I hear that one of the village elders who had taken up the new religion was now ready to renounce it. You can't teach us old dogs new tricks. I must admit, I was lonely and I decided to take a new lover. The culture didn't forbid it. The identification was quick and he was a willing participant. Hey! His agility would leave me breathless in no time. I was happy. This happiness would give me the strength I needed to tackle through my week with a hop in my step and singing. It didn't matter that he was younger than me. He was about my daughter's age. Well, it was somewhat troubling, but I would not let those troubling thoughts sit with me too long. I was lonely and we were good together. But now, strangely, I noticed that my lady parts were not doing too good after weeks of romping with my new lover. I tried every potion I knew and nothing seemed to work. I gave up. And with Bakari the medicine man away in hiding, I had no one else to confide in. I had to go to the modern doctor. The young doctor took a look at my test results in disbelief. I could see he had questions on his face, but I didn't know what they were. He seemed unsure of how to tell me, a woman more than his mother's age, that I had contracted a venereal disease that was rampant among the youth. After much fanfare, I left with medication in hand and some for my lover as well. I also had with me some protection. When I approached my lover about using them, he refused. He said, only people with many lovers use them. Me. I didn't have many lovers. You see, Chief and I rarely had occasion to. So I agreed. They weren't necessary. I had really missed my life as I knew it, and I asked for a few days off to go see my chief. I was heavily pregnant at this time. And when Chief saw me, he couldn't recall the last time we had been together. Still, he drew me close, asked me to close my eyes, and he said a prayer of thanksgiving for a child in old age.
I packed all my bags and moved to the village. I had had it with city life and all its intrigues. All my belongings were in boxes. Every trinket from travels, every hat, picture, and bag that had been part of my life for 39 years. The loneliness of the city had been too much to withstand. So I chose the silence of the village and the simplicity of that life. I wanted different. I was tired of the smiles that never get to the eyes, the empty talk at dinner tables, the hapless storytelling and empty dating life rampant in the city. I found myself amidst a warm community. I would take walks in the night without a care. I enjoyed it very much. The dinners with the neighbors, the laughter. And as the days passed, a deep seated, quiet, dull feeling of being alone started to set in. One evening, a couple sought me out. They invited me to tea and an afternoon snack, and I was happy to oblige. They had a proposal to make. What they offered, though strange to my ears, spoke to my heart directly. They offered me warm nights and full days, companionship, dignity, health, and friendship. It was so sweet to my ears with foreign bells clanging. They asked me to move in and live with them. It would ease my financial burdens. And they offered the security of marriage. I had never envisioned being in a polygamous relationship. And yet, with this proposal, I realized I had never felt more attractive, secure, and wanted. They approached at a perfect time. And at 40 years, I thought about how safe I felt and realized that this was everything I had always wanted. It was then that I said yes to a new religion and a new way of life. And I had given him my everything. He shortly fell silent, and I only got to know that I was expectant when I overslept one morning. While giving me a lecture about time management, my father, he looked at me and asked me if I was expectant, as I was sitting out in the sun, oblivious of its aggressiveness. My parents wanted to know the person responsible, but I quickly lied that it happened in a party and that I had been raped. I was unable to stand up to them. As the pregnancy grew, so did my pains. I hadn't really understood what was going on, but I knew that my boyfriend was not going to school, and so was I. As my pregnancy grew, I became very heavily pregnant. I wish I could stop going to school because the school administration, it explained that I was encouraging other students to have horns. And the teachers, they'd call me out every time to make an example of me. I didn't attend so many clinic dates, so I didn't know if I was having a boy or a girl. And this was because of the distance and the expense. I was so sad and so very lonely. I started to have pain on my left side early one morning, and it seemed unbearable. I told the school teacher, who thought that it must be labor. So she called the school bus driver and asked him to take me to hospital. It was a whole 46 kilometers away. I screamed
the whole way. We started the journey at 10:45 a.m. At noon, we arrived at the hospital. But after checking and checking, the clinical officer, he realized that the baby was breech and that I needed an operating theater. The hospital's theater, it had broken down 2 months ago, so I needed to be transferred. The only hospital that had a theater that was equipped to deal with me, it was a whole 86 kilometers away. The school bus driver, he had to call the head teacher and asked him to send him money so as to fuel the bus for the emergency trip needed. It took the head teacher 1.5 hours to send the necessary funds. And by the time he was sending them, I was in incredible pain. But I was still hanging on. We started the journey at 2:30 p.m. I started praying and mumbling words to myself. It was a bumpy road, but the school bus driver, he maneuvered every bump expertly. On arrival to the hospital at 4:30 p.m., my baby and I, we were announced dead. It was the day that I turned 18.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you like the performances? Yes. Thank you so much. This is part of Kibanda Theatre. We have a more interactive, because all our monologues are based on true stories, and after monologues we have discussion with the audience. But for today, in order for us to show this to you, we had to squeeze it. But we will be performing again on August 17th at Sarakasi Dome. Go to the Instagram page for Kibanda Theatre. Register, come and be part of our audience. It is free. Thank you.